Please welcome NRECA CEO Jim Matheson.
Right. Okay, welcome back to our final general session. You know, it's been a great few days hearing from the best in the business on topics like AI and grid reliability to co-op innovation and expanding broadband. One of the things that has always inspired me about rural electric cooperatives and rural communities in general is how they create leaders. And our next speaker is no stranger to rural communities. She grew up in a town of fewer than 3,000 people deep in the heart of Texas. It was in Glen Rose that Brooke Rollins first learned how to lead, and she's been leading ever since. She served as Governor Rick Perry's policy director, ran the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and served in a number of roles during the first Trump administration, including as director of the Domestic Policy Council. Most recently, Rollins served as founder, president, and chief executive officer of the America First Policy Institute. For decades, electric cooperatives have had an important strategic partnership with USDA and the Rural Utility Service, RUS. And I look forward to building on that relationship with Secretary Rollins at the helm. I'm excited to work with her to strengthen rural communities, continue important investments in reliable, affordable electricity, and unleash American energy. Please welcome the United States Secretary of Agriculture and a friend to electric co-ops, Brooke Rollins.
Well, good morning, everyone. Who is excited to be in Atlanta, Georgia? I am a massive country music fan, and I heard that y'all had Scotty McCreery here last night. Was he really good? Yeah, well, unfortunately, I can't sing, but I am really, really excited to be here with y'all today, and I want to thank Jim and the entire team at this incredible organization for the opportunity to be here. I am just about 3 weeks tomorrow on the job as the 33rd Secretary of Agriculture, but we have been hard at work, as I know you all have been watching what's been happening in Washington, and certainly it is it's been incredible to be a part of. Listen, what a sincere pleasure to be here at the NRECA's PowerXchange conference right here in the great city of Atlanta, Georgia. I first want to thank the amazing USDA staff that is here today who serve you all each and every day. If you're here from USDA Rural Development, our Rural Utility Service, RUS, please stand up and would you help me thank these amazing people. Thank you all for all you do. You know, being in Atlanta is a city close to my heart, and knowing the amazing and great Americans who live here and the great Americans who have called it home while working tirelessly for the rights and dignity due to all Americans. The city is always a city where the future is built, whether in terms of material or moral progress. And as we enter into the new golden age, as President Trump likes to call it, that activity will only accelerate. I will begin and end my remarks today with a fire. The first fire that I want to talk about is the one that burned Atlanta to the ground in the Civil War. Everyone knows about it. We all learned about it in school and talk about it. But what's less known is that after the war, the city of Atlanta hired General William Tecumseh Sherman to promote its economic development. His pitch was simple, that Americans should invest in Atlanta for the very same reason that he burned it down. It is at the center of everything. Today, right here and now, Atlanta is at the center of the conversation and the passion around rural electric cooperatives, rural electrification, and rural and small town America. To me, there's no bigger or better conversation out there. As your new Secretary of Agriculture, I know very well that it is a rural and small town America who keep our nation and the world fed. But as a native-born daughter, as Jim mentioned, of a tiny town on the plains of Texas called Glen Rose, I know even more closely that it is rural and small town America that keep our nation not just fed, but strong. Our small and rural communities, our tightly knit towns, and our isolated homesteads alike keep America strong because of the crops we grow and the livestock we raise. That's all true. But that strength comes from something more, something deeper than just the crops and the livestock. The strength of America that flows from the communities and homes you electrify is a function of the moral values and the resilience required to farm, essential to ranching, but also inculcated into every small town across this great country. I know it because I lived it and because it formed me as it formed so many of you here today. When you are in an American small town, when you are in rural America, when you are farming, when you are ranching, you are living at the precious intersection of community and duty. And that's the paradox of these communities, right? Because they seem small to those who don't know them or us, but they expose character and make the men and the women known fully to their neighbors like nowhere else for those that live in the big towns. It is a sort of challenge every day, and the millions of Americans who live that way of life meet it every single day. You meet it too. Your linemen, your workers, your managers, your boards, your colleagues of every electric cooperative out there, you are of and in these same communities. You sustain them. You make them possible. You drive their economies, and you make them, to use a word that we're working to bring back into favor, civilized. Sure, there's no real rural economy without you, but to borrow from Winston Churchill, man is more than just material computation. There is no rural, there is no small town America way of life without all of you and the work that you do every single day, and I thank you for that. The stuff, thank you. The constitutive stuff of our country and its foundational values require the support and the sustenance that you give with the power that transforms historic bastions of want and poverty in America's wide open spaces into vales of plenty. In an era in which too many Americans feel they must choose between the life, the family, and the communities they love and their own prospects in life, your work and your power helps make it possible for them to have both. That's been true for almost a full century now. Just a few weeks from today, we'll be celebrating the 90th anniversary of the executive order of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt that created the Rural Electrification Administration. 90 years ago. The creation of your rural electric cooperatives followed and brought new life to America's isolated and faraway places. Just a year later, Congress brought itself around to passing the Rural Electrification Act. It is difficult to recollect now just how transformative this was. Rural and small town life used to be a byword for crushing labor and hardship. They were hostage to the limitations then and captive to the weather and the daylight. In my own home state of Texas, do we have any Texans in the crowd? All right. Good to hear y'all. Good to be here. The hardship of scraping in Texas, the hardship of scraping out a living in a topsoil with limestone only inches below broke more than one man. Here in Georgia, the red clay meant relentless labor, unrelieved by any aid except from our animals. And I do not mean to paint a picture of agriculture in bygone days as unremitting suffering, but it was hard, and it remains hard today. But it was the advent of machinery, but especially electrification, that changed everything about it. The coming of the electric co-op was not just the advent of power, it was the bringing of dignity to a people for whom it was long overdue. That's a proud inheritance, and I want to remind every man and woman of the NRECA that you have that to live up to, but that is what you are doing every day. In the administration of my boss, President Donald J. Trump, we're working to live up to it every day on your behalf as well. Our president sees what you do. He sees your importance, and he sees the indispensability of the way of life that you and your work make possible. And that is why he has acted since day one to support and extend that work. I hope you all saw the historic issuance of executive orders on January 20th, 2025. I think it was within the first hours of the president taking the oath of office. 3 of them directly affected you and your communities and your work. One unleashed American energy production, another declared an energy emergency, and a third declared war on America's cost of living crisis. This is a continuation of the concern and the action he showed in his first term, in which I was also privileged to serve, as Jim mentioned. The Reconnect program, helping communities get connected to high-speed internet, was launched then, and it has proven to be a tremendous success, and we'll be announcing soon efforts to continue and build on that. In the years since, 430 awards have been made, investing almost $6 billion in high-speed services across the country. And your rural electric cooperatives were essential to this success and will continue to be so. At USDA, we are furthermore acting fast on the President's orders and vision. We're actively cutting red tape and leveraging the President's executive order on the energy emergency to expedite electrical generation and infrastructure projects of direct concern to both rural Americas and more specifically to the cooperatives that you all lead. We are speeding the turnaround time for environmental and historic preservation reviews, knowing full well that bureaucratic delay is not just morally unacceptable, it risks crippling American vitality if unchecked. Our president, thank you, and that is a big effort of ours. Our president saw the plight of American agriculture, saw the state of American industry, and saw the needs of small town and rural America, and he acted. Because he acts and he leads, we too shall act and lead. That action is critical for reasons you know well here. For America's farmers and ranchers, fuel and electricity used for operating equipment account for a significant share of production costs. When you add on additional energy-related costs, for example, purchases of pesticides, of fertilizer, or commodity transportation, that share jumps even higher. And it gets higher the more rural and remote that you are, as you all know better than anyone. Widening the aperture just a bit, agriculture represents about 2.5% of total American energy consumption, and it is the first 2.5% that enables the entire rest of the whole national economy. And that is something that we will continue to discuss and make sure all of our country understands. That 2.5% of American energy contributes 5.5% of the national GDP, well past $1 trillion of production and activity. What this means for an average American is a direct link between the cost of energy and the cost of groceries. The president just doesn't want to facilitate agriculture for its own sake, although that would be reason enough for reasons I know you all know. He wants to make it more affordable and more economically efficient because that directly affects the welfare and the personal dignity of every single American and every single American household everywhere in our great country. If you're asking yourself right at this moment, what about infrastructure and investment? Then let me tell you that we are asking the same thing. We know that because energy is essential, a secure and resilient grid is essential too. This becomes even more urgent as a concern because of what's being located out in American rural areas now. Not just farms, but the data centers that will power and continue to power the artificial intelligence revolution, which carry their own energy demands that are orders of magnitude, and you all know this, that have been ever required before. You see, small town and rural America are building the American future in more ways than one. I love that I can trust that the co-ops are governed by their customers, that the ratepayers are their owners, that the decision-making of every co-op is shaped by the very farmer and rural American in which they and you all serve. You have my commitment and the president's commitment that our grid, our infrastructure, and our generation will meet that challenge. Our rural electric cooperatives will meet that challenge, and we'll meet it because there's really no other alternative. We must. And we'll meet it because the first time you have a president and an administration that sees both needs and potential and has as its first instinct not to curb it, not to shut it down, but to accelerate it at the speed that is necessary to make this country great again. It is for these reasons, thank you. It is for these reasons that I am pressing to wrap up the review of the obligated New Era, PACE, and REAP projects. I know this is very important to a lot of you. These were all funded by the Inflation Reduction Act under the last administration. We are moving through those and have been working day and night, hopefully with some final answers by the end of this week or next week. These are top of mind, and I want all of you to know it is our commitment to get through that very, very quickly. I was hoping it would be by today, but hopefully in the next few days. I'm also pleased to announce that since the President returned to office, the USDA, through the Rural Utilities Service, has approved 14 core rural electrification loans valued at over $1.27 billion. These projects include investments in a natural gas plant, upgrades to an existing coal facility, and transmission and distribution infrastructure. I said earlier that rural and small town life used to be a byword for crushing labor and hardship. But my friends, in the age of Trump, it will be a byword for innovation, for flourishing, and for American greatness. You'll be hearing more from us on this in the coming weeks. You're the first to hear this, and I'm excited to share with you that we will be working with our federal, state, and local partners and all of you to develop a bold strategy to revive rural America. President Trump's heart is with our communities out across this country, and he has tasked me with ensuring that when we walk out the door in 4 years, that our rural communities will be more restored and more revivified and better and more prosperous than ever before. And I can't wait to keep talking to you all about that. I said I'm going to begin and end my remarks with a fire, and so I shall. Robert Caro, in his 1982 first volume on the life of Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, wrote of a little girl in the Texas Hill Country in the Great Depression. Her name was Evelyn Smith, and like her mother and grandmother before her, she grew up on a rural homestead accompanied by backbreaking work. And that was really all she ever expected in her life. One day, the men of the Rural Electric Cooperative came through and wired up the Smith family homestead. But there was no power in the wires, and across many months, little Evelyn Smith and her parents forgot about the promise of light and of power because they no longer believed in it. Then one evening in the cold air of November 1939, the Smith family, on the way back home from Johnson City, saw their home in the distance, and it was burning. Evelyn's mother screamed, "The house is on fire," and in great fear and dismay, ran as quickly as they could to see exactly what was happening and if anything could be saved. But suddenly, little Evelyn said, "No, Mama, the lights are on." The Rural Electric Co-op had turned on the power. For the first time in the lives of these hard-working, long-suffering frontier Texans, the lights were finally on. And that changed everything. To the men and women, all of you here, but to also all of the people that you represent of the NRECA, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the honor of being here. Thank you for your work, your support, your cooperation in President Trump's vision. But most of all, thank you for keeping the lights on. God bless you all. God bless America. And thank you for your great work.